Passes pretty quickly. Is someone else going to be on with Ahmad? You know,
I don't know.
I think our last meeting from the minutes, must have been another party. Someone from his staff.
It shows Ahmad was
Just
here.
Ahmad.
Mm-hmm.
Looking at,
Up at the top, it shows who was in attendance.
okay.
Good afternoon,
Good afternoon, Ahmad.
Director. How are you?
We are expecting Director Dan Ziegler as well.
Yeah, I assumed he didn't indicate that he wasn't coming. There's Steve.
Hello.
Hello, Steve.
Okay, I'm using this other computer and it took me a while to get on and figure out how to use it, but I'm here.
Okay. Well, should we just begin? Welcome to the Audit Committee meeting, and I think we do a roll call.
Yeah, we will do a roll call. Director Jex
Here.
and Director Dan Ziegler.
Here.
Okay, I guess the first item is, and again, I think, thanks, Marcia. We got the minutes from the last meeting. Before we approve them, there's some comments or some follow-up things that related to the audit that are mentioned in there. And there's just maybe 3 or 4, and do we want to go through those before we approve them? Steve, do you have any questions or comments about the minute?
I did not.
Okay. On the item 3.1 under the minutes, I think it's the second item comment that I've made, and it said the auditor will perform a thorough review and recommendations focused on control, compliance, collection, and recovery related deployment activity. So I don't know if we want to deal with that in that because it's not on the specific agenda for the
Hmm.
questions today. So if do we want to just deal with that, Ahmad?
We can roll it in with the regular scope of the audit once we jump in there.
Okay, the other one was related on the second page, dealing with the impairments of transact or any items on the books. Want to deal with that in the same thing?
Yes.
Okay. And then the other one that indicated that next one, or 2, 3 down there says, does management have the appropriate resources? And question there was administrative staff will need to be addressed if MOFD assumes bigger projects. Obviously we have with regards to additional deployments, and we've done this, the current $7 million grant that we've received, which will result in, I assume, significant additional work activity. Is that one we want to address in the regular meeting, or?
We could definitely do it all together.
Okay, well then there's just 2 or 3 others. I'll just do that and come back to those then when we get to the regular meeting, the regular agenda. Okay. Any other comments regarding the minutes?
I don't have any.
Okay, then I would recommend we approve the minutes.
I'd agree with that.
Okay. All right, then let's move on to the agenda itself.
And Director Jex, just before we moved on, I would note we do not have any attendees and we have not received any public comment for items
Okay,
on the agenda.
all right. Okay. Well, Alon, thank you for spending some time with us this afternoon. Appreciate that. Appreciate your having completed the audit. I assume everything is done and pretty well wrapped up, other than the presentation to the full board, I think at a subsequent meeting in November, if that's correct. Is that, Glorianne? In November?
Yes, at the November regular meeting, the comprehensive annual financial report will be presented for board approval.
Okay. Well, why don't we then just proceed? I sent out a series of questions. She's got questions for the auditor. These are pretty standard follow-up questions at the end of an audit. And I think, Ahmad, you received a copy, and I know Steve, I think, did.
Yeah.
As well as the rest of the group. So you want to just go ahead and address them one by one?
Sure. Okay, so just a brief overview before I start asking the questions. And you probably are already well familiar with what we do there. Scope of the audit is to ensure financial statements are fairly stated. We split it into 2 phases, maybe 3 phases. Interim phase is when we look at the processes, the payments and the receipts and the payroll. And then the final phase is a confirmation phase. We confirm all these balances that are reported on your financial statements or do some other audit procedure to ensure that they are fairly stated. And then the reporting phase, which is this phase right here. We work with the district on making sure that the financial report is in compliance with reporting requirements. And so I can't remember, Gloria, if so there was a gas bill that was issued on Friday saying you can't use the word CAFR anymore. It's effective, I think, for 23 as opposed to 21, but earlier implementation is encouraged. It should be now annual comprehensive financial report as opposed to comprehensive annual financial report. So the draft that you have in there, I believe, still mentions it. So it's you can early implement. You don't have to do it right now. But I think the abbreviation should be removed. So I'll work with Gloria on making sure that we remove that from the financial statements.
Is there, that would just mean changes some wording in the report?
Correct. So I guess there's a meaning to the word kafir that is derogatory. So they decided to remove it. That CAFR is not something that the industry is using anymore. Everybody flipped that word comprehensive annual with annual comprehensive now. So we're going to flip those words, but the abbreviation is where the emphasis is that it should not be used anymore. And that's what
I would recommend we go ahead and make the change. If it's not significant, and title it the way it should be done then.
Yeah, sounds good. It's not really a lot of work. It's just a control and find process that we do in the Word document, the Excel, and we'll be more than happy to replace them.
Okay.
Okay.
Do
Sounds
you agree?
Yes.
Great.
Good.
Okay.
okay, great. So we're pretty much done. I think we are just basically pending approval by the board. Maybe just updating the board minutes to see if there's anything recent that had happened since the last time we were there, but we pretty much are done. So I'm gonna jump into the questions right away.
Right. If you want to just take the list and just, you can indicate the question and then just an answer. Some of them are going to just be yes, no, or you may have some comments. And so if you want to do that, that would probably expedite the process.
Okay. Yeah, so many, just like you said, Director, many of them are a yes or no. A yes would indicate that there is a reportable condition, and a no would indicate, based on the format of those questions, a no is there are no reportable conditions. So if that is the format of that question, the answer is no. We had nothing to report on. We had no adjustments, no difficulties encountered in the performance of the audit. So I just want to make sure that we are answering all these questions in there. So did we have any disagreements? No. Accounting principles used. There are no changes in the current year or in the upcoming year.
Okay.
There's really nothing of significance as it stands right now for the next couple of years. So there were none that were implemented in this year, and there will be none that will be implemented within the next years. Okay, any significant changes in net assets? There are no significant changes in equity over at the district. I believe if we look at the financial statement, the equity continues to be for the general fund about $18 million overall, $26 million in equity. That's on the modified accrual basis of accounting. It is negative on the full accrual basis of accounting. Is there a change, significant change since the prior year? Slight change, I guess, with respect to the full accrual statement. So you have two sets in there. You're used to seeing the fund financial statements, which is the general fund and the capital project fund, debt service fund. The second set of financial statements that is reported in this report is on a full accrual basis, and there is a change with respect to pensions. So these plans had made significant amount of money over the past 2 years, and they continue to make quite a bit of some money just because of the performance of the stock market. So you'll see a change in net position related to that. That change in net position is impacted by that change by, I want to say, about $5 million ran through the current year's income statement of that full accrual set on the financial statement. So that is the significant change there.
Ahmad, I thought the changes when we were going over with the actuaries in their report, of course, I think that was all on the medical. They I thought the actual assumptions or whatever they are, changes in estimated earnings, et cetera, are amortized over a 3-year period, or I mean, a 5-year period.
Right.
So the 5 million is being allocated or amortized over 5 years?
Correct.
Oh, okay. I thought maybe it was recorded all in 1 year.
Yeah, they didn't want you to change your income statement drastically by the change in the stock market predominantly. So what they do is they have you defer them and then amortize them over a 5-year period. So
Okay,
what you're seeing that is a 1-year amortization. And you're gonna continue to see those improvements because of the funds that were accumulated as a result of the returns in the stock market related to pension and OPEB liabilities.
so that largely relates to the pension fund,
Correct.
the biggest number.
Correct.
Okay.
Conflict of interest and related party transactions, we reported none on the financial statements. And let's just make sure here, I've got everything captured. No difficulties in the performance of the audit. So one question in there, what can the organization do to reduce the audit time? Is this in terms of the publication of the financial statement? Or is it in terms of the performance of the audit? The audit typically is done, I want to say late August, beginning of September, and we just stay on hold until we get many of those valuations. One is from Cesera and the other one is from OPEB. We actually got the OPEB really early this year, but we can't finalize those numbers until the pension and OPEB numbers are published. So it has been a rather efficient process in the past 2 years. I want to say we got acquainted with where the records are, and we have our memos and templates all well structured so that they can easily flow through and produce these financial statements. But are we able to issue it a little earlier? It all depends on these pension plans and when they publish their finalized number. And then are there any other items that should be discussed with relate to the audit committee? We have none. These are the financial statements, you have them. So most of these numbers are well confirmed. From a material perspective, we confirmed all the big numbers in there, your property taxes, your cash and investments, your investment earnings, your debt. Most of these numbers were fully confirmed. If they are material, they were confirmed. So we think that these are fairly stated statements, and with that, I'll be more than happy to take any questions.
Well, there's some of the questions you didn't cover, and the questions that I had, there are some that where we were looking for a specific response. Like, did you review information furnished to others, like the actuaries?
Yes. So what we do an analysis on the assumptions that are used by the actuaries, and your actuaries are for pension and OPEB. The biggest thing is the discount rate. Is this a reasonable discount rate or not? And what we do is we compare it with the industry. So whatever that is out there, we see what CalPERS is using. There's another plan that we audit. Alsters is another one that we look at, and many of the other smaller plans. Pretty much everybody's using between 6.5% to 7.5% in terms of discount rate, and those are the most significant assumptions. If they had other changes in the assumptions, then we will ask the question, like life expectancy. I know they changed that a couple of years ago based on more recent updated data, but at this point, there were no significant changes in assumptions. The most significant is the discount, and that didn't change from last year.
So the data that goes to the actuaries for them to make the calculations, that's the information I'm questioning whether or not that was reviewed or covered or audited, looked at, confirmed, so that you're satisfied with the data that goes to the actuaries.
And that's a director, that's a really good question. Yes, they were. The audit standards, they do require us to test what they call the census. So the census is basically a listing of the individuals that are either active or retired that the district would send to the actuary, and the actuary would perform a calculation. So Sarah, they already have that data because as you process payroll, you're paying them pension. But we also look at the transmission of the data. And what we do is we look at terminations and additions, or separations and additions to employees, and we make sure that those are listed on the census. That's how we ensure completeness of that census or that data that was submitted to the actuary.
Okay. Well, that's great. I assume that was the case that you did. The issues, like another one here that I don't think you touched on. How did you satisfy yourself regard pending threatened lawsuits or litigation?
Yeah, you know what? We normally confirm it with the attorney and we get an update. Let me see if we received that. We did receive it. So we'll update it, but we confirmed with legal counsel
That there were nothing of any consequence or significance.
Correct. Renee Public Law Group, I think, is who we confirmed that with. I'm not sure if there's anyone else there, but they indicated that there is no significant litigation out there against the district. We'll get an update before we opine.
Yeah. So Glorianne, there's no other attorneys other than our regular legal counsel that is handling any litigation matters or potential litigation matters.
Correct. It's just the Renee Public Law Group.
Okay. Did you encounter any difficulties in obtaining management representations?
We have not yet, because we haven't signed the opinion. As soon as we receive the board approval, we will send it to management. I don't anticipate that there will be any
So the
issue.
regular representation letter you've not received yet?
We have not sent it to management yet.
Okay.
Director Jax, I just have the general question is, I mean, overall, is there any really significant findings that gonna come, that that you're aware of? Anything that, really significant, I guess what I'm saying, anything?
No, we have a comment last year related to segregation in the IT system. And which is basically having access to two modules, like, when you have accounts payable and purchasing, and this is system access more than it is the actual implementation of the process. So upon looking at the IT system in there, we noted that one individual had access to both systems, which should have been segregated. And upon looking at it again this year, that comment was implemented, and those modules, or access to those modules, had been implemented.
Oh, okay.
So we like to see segregation there. There's a record and there's the cash. And like, as an example, accounts payable and purchasing. Accounts payable has access to the cash. The purchasing is someone who adds new vendors in there, and those two modules should be separated from each other. And that's what the district did, is they implemented that within the system. So that not the same person can do both at the same time.
Okay.
There any, I don't think you mentioned whether or not there were any past audit adjustments.
I don't believe we did. I can confirm that very quickly here. And the answer to your question, Director, is none.
Well, there were none.
None.
Yeah, must have had a pretty clean set of books.
I guess also you're familiar with our books after, doing this for a few years. So,
Okay, let's see if there's anything else. So there's no unresolved matters. I think you addressed that.
were there any in this fiscal year that you did the audit for, any new like laws or new reporting requirements, and did we adhere to them and meet all our requirements?
None. There is quite a bit of some changes out there in the industry as usual. There's nothing of significance to the district. Nothing that I foresee within the next couple of years
Okay.
that will impact. No changes in the laws that is applicable to the district that I'm aware of. So the answer to your question, Director, is there's nothing of significance.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Are changes to like Gatsby, are they done when needed, or is it on like a cycle? I'm just curious myself. Is it, they do it every few years? Is it like a building code where they do it every few years, or is it just as needed?
It's on an annual basis. We typically have 2 to 3 Gatsbys
Okay.
effective in each fiscal year. Various areas within the financial statements are reported. So if sometimes they hit investments, sometimes they change leases, sometimes they change fund structure. So there's a few changes here and there depending on the area. It's just that the district itself, pretty much it's a single source revenue. Property taxes is the most significant for the district. So
Mhm.
they don't have complexity of a county or a city where they have water and sewer and all kinds of operations.
Right.
So not much that is applicable to the district. I don't foresee anything of significance to the district in the upcoming 2 years.
No.
I was going to say in the commercial sector, this year, treatment of leases, but I don't think we have any leases of any consequence.
Right.
And typically GASB sometimes follows the commercial on things like that, where it's dealing with transaction dividend or recognition of revenue or whatever it may be, which was this year as well in the commercial sector, that people were adopting changes. But I don't know anything in the commercial sector that would, eventually end up getting into GASB's
Mm-hmm.
on their agenda.
Yeah, I mean, there's discussion in there, and I assume that it will take some time until something is solidified into an actual statement. The change is significant that it's been discussed for the past 3 years. It's called the financial reporting model. So right now, your statements have basically 2 sets that are duplicating each other. One is the fund financial statements, which is something that you see during the budget adoption process. And that second set is what they call the full accrual statements, where you report on it, the pension and the OPEB. So the idea now is to maybe report some of these longer term items that shows up in that second set. There may be they're still discussing it, but there's discussion in there about moving some of these long-term items into those individual funds. I think the most significant one that they're contemplating moving is the pension and the bonds. But there's nothing that can be said right now. And I think until this is finalized, it's going to take 3 or 4 years. There was a GASB that was issued that basically changed the face of financial statements for governments, which is 34. That's back in 2000, and it was implemented in 3 phases. And until they came up with that standard, it took them about 10 years. So I assume this one will probably take some time because they are soliciting feedback from various industry groups over there to make sure that they've got everything covered. Will it be the same way I described it right now? It may not be. It may change. They may even just scrap the entire project and just keep it as is. But that is the most significant. That is forthcoming, but it's going to take some years until it comes.
So where would they put, what would they move it into, one of the funds?
Yes, allocate it. Yeah, you would allocate it if they are allocable. If they're not allocable, you just put it in the individual fund. But I am not sure if that's going to go through, because there's quite a bit of some resilience there. Many of these governments had already established debt covenants that are measured in a particular way. So they would have to go back and change their covenants. I'm not sure how GASB is going to implement that change.
Okay. Okay, why don't we go to those ones in the minutes that I had a question on. The question, I guess it was Mike, said, will perform through a thorough review of recommendations focused on controls, compliance, collection, and recovery related to deployment activities. And so that, when you indicated you've gone through that.
So just to confirm, deployment activities is the billing that the district charges to other districts. Am I confirming? Is my understanding correct?
This is the billings that are sent to the state for deployment on major fire activities. And we've had a fair amount of activity. In fact, I think it's probably the largest year, a big difference this year.
Right. So, Glorianne, if you can help me, is that the strike team?
Yes, it's the strike team receivable. That's correct.
Yes. And so, yes, we had no exceptions. Looks like we sampled 23 items in there. I'm looking at them throughout the year. Tested the multiple of attributes, including a review process, billing on time, reflected actual work that was billed, and reviewing that the activity was allowed by the grant. And yes, we had no exceptions for the entire sample in there. So yes, it was.
Yeah, the deployments, I assume, Glorianne, are related to, there's multiple buildings. I mean, you might have a group deployed on a fire that might last for beyond 2 weeks or something, whatever it would be. There'd be multiple buildings, and it's a segregation of those costs associated with their salaries and overtime that then gets billed to the state and then sits on our books as a receivable. And I think at the end of the year, there was probably a sizable receivable. And I think the last board meeting, only a small number had been paid on that $900,000. And I think then it was expected to go up over $1 million subsequent to the end of the year.
Yes, so that receivable is on the books and it was tested during the audit.
Okay, that's not one that would be confirmed because the state probably would not respond to a confirmation request.
Correct. State will not respond. There are too many of us. So there are too many.
Well, they don't respond to paying their bills sometimes either.
That's right. So yes, but what we do is we test the subsequent receipts and the actual billing if not yet received. So that's what we did there.
Okay. The other one, any discussions with regards to possible impairment of any assets, thinking in terms of fixed assets? That was the question.
We noted none. um, Yeah, we have none to report on. We haven't noticed anything in there that would require an impairment of capital assets.
Okay. Um, The next one on that, where we indicated that the administrative staff will need to be addressed additional resources if we were to expand or have significant additional continued kinds of things like these employment activities. And also with the $7 million grant that we have, which will require significant amount of activity, administrative control activity associated with, whether or not our resources or our personnel are going to be able to manage that project without additional resources.
Well, Director, I really can't comment about that because we're only there for a couple of weeks out of the year. During those 2 weeks, we encountered no difficulties in obtaining the information that we needed from the district. So everything was on time. But beyond that, I really don't know if the workload is significant to warrant adding new resources in there. That's probably a question to management.
Well, I think the question or the comment says, Glorianne, I think you made the comment, advised the capacity issue with the administrative staff will need to be addressed if MLFD assumes an additional big project. So I assume that was your response. And so in terms of interaction with the staff, if everything currently that is being done seems to be, timely done, they'll handle, the administration of those kinds of things. I think we haven't added any staff in terms of doing and managing that, and we haven't had indicated that there will be any. I guess I was just interested in your observations, or Gloria, your comment.
Right, the comment was originally had to do with getting another large field break grant, which I think Chief, are you still on here? I think that we have. I mean, I haven't seen the documentation or anything for the new field break grant. I think it's still being negotiated. So that's what my concern is with that and the volume of admin work that it's going to create. So I think they included I think I heard, I was always told they were going to include money in the budget to hire, help where needed. But I don't think it's, we still don't have the contract. So I think it's still being negotiated.
Still being negotiated. But I mean,
it's still, if I may, it's still being negotiated. And one of the elements we've been clear about is limiting the impact on existing staff due to the recognition that we are at or near capacity with our steady state. So we're hesitant to just casually add new elements to that. But we do see the opportunity to maintain the same level of oversight so that whoever we're using on a contracted basis to support the fuel break and the billing and so forth, that all of that is flowing back through for review to make sure it's compliant with our existing controls and methods in a similar manner to what we attempted to do in the North Windy Shade of fuel break, with the obvious refinement of including our lessons learned from that project on this one.
So right now, you're not anticipating adding additional staff in order to handle that or manage it?
I am not. I believe when and where that is needed, we would do that on a contract basis specific to the fuel break.
Okay. Let's see.
Director Jex, I have a question. I have one more. In our last meeting that we had last week, we had an end of the fiscal year report where it was reported that our fund balance was 42.8% of our budgeted general fund revenue. Did your audit confirm that? I mean,
So, and as a percentage of revenue, so we confirmed your revenues. The majority of them were all confirmed. Like, I mean, but 95% of your revenues obviously are property taxes or the fire flow tax, or even interest revenue from the county treasurer, and all of these were confirmed. Your fund balance was recalculated and we found no exceptions. So at this point, it's the way that you calculate that fund balance. So I wasn't really part of that calculation, and it's not included in the scope of the audit either.
Oh, okay.
But the numbers that you will use for that calculation are reported on the financial statements and they are audited.
Okay.
There was another one, I think, this was a policy issue. Again, in the response, it says Director Jex requested that the fraud policy be updated to require fraud reporting to the audit committee. I guess our policy didn't cover reporting. This was one of the questions that, again, in the minutes of the last meeting.
So I'm not sure what the policy is, but from our perspective, if there is fraud, and maybe I have not included the management letter with this draft, but upon sending something to the board, then I can tell you well in advance right now that there is nothing to be reported on from the fraud.
Right, yeah.
But we will
It's
report
just
it.
that our policy, if there were, then I think it's something that should be reported to the audit committee.
That's correct. So from our standards requires me material or immaterial, I have to report it to the governing board. So if it did occur, we will report it. But then in terms of the policy itself, that's probably something that management and the board will have to work on.
Yeah. There was a comment that the audit standards, this was again response to a question that was asked in the preliminary before the last meeting. It says the audit standards requires that the auditor meet with at least one board member. I assume 2 board members manages that.
That's correct. We are required to meet with you at the beginning and at the end. That's the minimum, and which is what we did. I believe we met obviously right
Okay.
here. in
Yeah, I
June.
assume that this meeting satisfies that. Okay. Oh, this is something I don't know whether it got into the draft. There was a comment that I made, said requested recommendations regarding the possible changes and in the introductory section relating to goals and objectives and ideas. And you were going to look at some of those. I think there was a comment you made, Dan, that what differences there were in our annual report versus others that you were familiar with. And I think their comment was that how they handled the introductory comments in the annual report.
Yeah. So I am gonna have to get back to you, Director, on that. See if there's anything that we need to change in the introductory section. We do have a section there for major initiatives that speaks about, big things happening in the upcoming year or happening in the current year.
Right.
So I don't know. Let me just go through that one more time and see if there's anything that we need to.
Yeah, I think the comment that says required supplemental information, other information, and comprehensive annual financial reports, asked if there was any narrative sections in the management report that could be edited. Let's see. If there's anything that MOFD should add to the introductory section answered nothing at this time, but the staff would review and determine if anything should be added. And then I suggested that other, his district's historical perspective and applications for the future, and some of that I had read were included, but was not in ours.
That was good.
Okay,
We will circle back with you. If there are any changes that we're gonna be adding in there, Gloria and you and I, maybe we'll take out a couple of other fire districts out there. It's in that major initiative sections. You do have some really good content in there that speaks to the fund balance reserves and the pension stabilization.
right.
fund.
I think there's some big, real improvements have been made in the last couple of years. And so I think there's, it's good. It was just a question of, in looking at some other CAFRs, shouldn't use that term now, annual reports.
Yeah.
That would be positive or, provide better information to the reader. It would be appropriate maybe just to take a look at that and beef that up a little bit.
Sounds good.
Okay. All right. Any other comments? Gloria Ann, Mary, Steve, Chief?
No, I have none.
Okay, so I assume it's on the agenda for the November meeting. And I believe Ahmad, you'd be there. And then I think the final input, what was the deadline, Gloria Ann, that you gave to the board? End of December, October?
Yes, the end of this month, so that we can prepare and present the final report at the November meeting.
Okay. Have you gotten any comments yet?
No, I have not.
It might be a good idea to go back out and with an email or something and just remind them of the deadline so that there's no holdup or assuming or that a negative confirmation that it will assume if we do not hear from you, that you have none.
Yes, sir, will do.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much. Appreciate your work and effort, Ahmad. And I think there was a comment about towards the end of the questions regarding the relationship with your firm. We appreciate your work and effort, and hopefully we can continue that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ahmad. Thank you, staff. Director Jex.
Beth, thank you, Steve.
All right.
Sign off, or do we need to? We don't have to adjourn. There's no requirement to adjourn, Marcia.
We can just, as the committee, adjourn the meeting.
Okay.
All right.
Very good. Thanks. Bye.
Okay, thanks, everybody. All right, bye.